go, we can only get it out of here. So actually, no, that's not the case. Well, there we go.
Hello.
All right, Chris.
Hi.
Yeah, this is welcome. So you're calling in from Melbourne, aren't you?
Yes, that's right.
Oh, cool. Well, yeah. So I've just given them sort of a rundown of my version of Swarm. I think everyone's got a different version of Swarm, and sort of logged into my account and just showed them the Pioneer tag. Do you want to just give us a little bit of history about yourself and how you discovered the project, and then we'll ask our next questions?
Sure, no worries. So I started on this project probably about years ago. I was fresh out of uni, and it actually happened kind of by accident. In IT, I used to be in support desk, and I always hated working for a boss. Ever since I was back in IT, and I suppose one thing led to another, and I had this pursuit of learning and reading lots of books and stuff like that, and I eventually IT and tried out real estate for a while, and real estate was okay because it had a bit more like autonomy to it, but it was too lonely working 6 days a week and didn't have any really authentic connections with people, and like it felt like you were bugging people if you weren't in the right market. So I moved on from that. I studied human resources management, only to find out that there's to be called, well, managers and employees used to be called masters and slaves, and that gave me a rude awakening. And I thought, oh well, I'm going to continue my studies, and I took that to university. And as soon as I finished university, I had a pretty good understanding of how the world worked, and I was like, well, where does that leave me from here? Not with many options. So I desperately wanted to get out of my situation living with my parents. And so I took the first job that I could get, which happened to be Uber. And I started driving Uber intensely, making as much money as I could. It turned out to be pretty lucrative at the time. And I joined an Uber, and inside this Uber forum, an activist named Christopher David, who had friends in the Libertarian Party. And Christopher David wanted to challenge and take on Uber and utilize blockchain technologies. So we worked about a year until the Swarm eventually evolved into what it is today, and we became Swarm.City. The reason is because the SWARMWise, and it's pretty much like a swarm or a gathering of bees, and if they sense that there's tension or that there's smoke in a particular hive, they'll abscond and move on to a new hive where there's less tension or where there's less danger. We did that, and we evolved, and we became Swarm.City. We did a brand fork, and in January of this year, we evolved into Swarm.City, which is a decentralized commerce platform as opposed to Arcade.City, which used to be the idea of getting Uber on the blockchain. Now Swarm.City is a platform by which many different companies can plug themselves in and then transact. For example, Arcade.City could plug themselves in, and we have a new rideshare company that could be in competition with Arcade.City that could plug themselves into Swarm.City called Pacer, run by one of our marketing directors called Tommy Marquez. So that's pretty much how I got involved in the project, and it's been an amazing ride. And I'm sure that there'll be many other questions that I could talk all night about, all the challenges and the things that we've had, but plenty of successes and hurdles along the way, including NBA players and the Chainsmokers taking rides. And I did my first ride here back in Arcade.City, but yeah, programmers, and most would have we had a parody wallet hack and Ether, because nothing stops the swarm. even though we lost about 9 million from by anyone that had that exploit. So we saved companies about 48 million, I think it was, US. Unlucky 3 companies that got hacked in the early days of. Still, I hope the connection hasn't dropped off or something.
I don't think it's our connection. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, so with that said, I'll pass back to you.
Yeah, so so I just wanted to point out, so Chris, like Swarm.City is being obviously run very different to other projects. And I mean, in fact, it's actually being run very similar to the Ethereum project. And can you just sort of point out the differences and why, you know, there's such a sort of, you know, most people are used to a very formal way of presenting, or there's kind of like 2 differences in sort of ways of doing things. I sort of feel there's the formal way of doing things, or there's the completely open source way. And I think a lot of people struggle with that with Swarm, and they, in the early days, they, you know, lots of people struggled with that with Ethereum as well. But, you know, obviously Ethereum's a lot bigger now. But yeah, can you just explain the differences and how you find people react to the project because of that?
Okay, so we pretty much follow the principles of SWARMWise. It's a tactical manual for taking on or changing the world. It was written by Rick Folkvinger of the Swedish Pirate Party, and he used it to gain power over in, I think it's Sweden, or, yeah, must be Sweden. And so we work pretty much in small hives or small communities, and basically anybody can be the leader of one of these small communities. They're called hives. So there could be a communications hive, there could be a business hive, and there could be multiple of these depending on the market, depending on where you are, depending on whether you want to do things a certain way. The overarching thing is that we are like a leaderless project. I've been here from the very beginning, so I have a good understanding of how it all runs and how it all works, which is why I'm here talking before you. So I wouldn't say that I'm like in charge of the project, but I have a good understanding of it, because really there is nobody in charge. In the final stages, there was several different stages to getting to being completely decentralized, and we have pretty much moved beyond that, beyond the centralized stages at this point, because of the fact that we have none of the funds left after the hack. So it kind of got shortcutted from being partially centralized to being completely decentralized, because we have no more money to pay anyone, and the only thing that we have left is the tokens that we were going to be left with in the end. City tokens. And the Swarm.City tokens are on the blockchain, which is similar to how Bitcoin operates, except for it's on the Ethereum network. And so using Ethereum is that there's smart contracts which can be used to authorize or sort of pay out people under certain conditions being met. So the programmer, this is all a bit technical, but the programmers can pretty much set up parameters for when people get paid, or in our case, we're having an escrow service. So funds will be locked up between 2 parties until a condition is met where the service has been provided, for example. So party A says, hey, I want my lawn mowed, and then party B says, yes, I can do the job for you, and then they transact together. They go into a locked agreement on the blockchain. The money gets locked up in escrow accounts. Another party has their funds. They both put their money where their mouth is. One party A and party B put down a small fee to them if they complete the service or the transaction is successful. If it goes into a dispute, then they appoint a mediator to come along and then release the funds upon the transaction being completed successful, or the mediation process being completed successfully. So that's how we're running it at the moment. which takes care of any disputes that may happen in a decentralized manner. And so both parties will then have to agree to who they want to have as an appointed mediator, and that is based on their reputation. And the reputation is associated with what's called Swarm Reputation Tokens, or SWR. So you can look at someone's reputation. Again, we've built in a feature in our app, Swarm.City, to see how good a person's reputation is before you appoint them for a service. And pretty much anybody can do that. Yeah.
Cool.
Any questions on that?
Does anyone have any questions at the moment?
Sounds a bit confusing, I know. There's a lot to take in all at once.
Okay.
It's not based off Ricardian contract system, is it? Something else, is it? Is it totally? It's the question is who acts as the mediator in the Swarm system?
So it's kind of like having decentralized courts. Anybody can step in and be a mediator, but nobody necessarily has to trust that mediator. Track record, just as if you'd go to a bank and you'd meet someone for the first time and you'd be like, why should I trust you? And they're in a certain particular uniform. They abide by a set of standards that you agree upon. You read the terms and conditions of how they operate their business. If they fall outside of those conditions, then it's kind of like they're breaking their contract. And you'd have to appoint them in the same fashion that you've appointed the other party, which is that you'd have to put down, they would have to put down a fee of their own, right? And if they break the terms of their conditions, then another mediator could step in and it could go on forever, but then nobody would get anywhere, so it wouldn't be a very productive world. So the world currently works kind of in a trust relationship, and people want things to happen. They don't want to be stuck in arbitration processes forever. Of course, that is a potential, very small potential for that to happen, but then again, nobody would get anything done and that would just be pointless. So and we can only do as much as we can, which is to set in protocols to enable things to happen. And sometimes you got to cut your losses and say, well, it's for a freaking gardening service. I'm not going to spend 10 years for a small gardening fee or something. I'm going to move on with my life and make money elsewhere. Just like a business will say, it's a costing. I got screwed once in a while. Oh well. System. But it will have measures in place to prevent against people trying to screw other people over the best that they can. Well, nobody wants to have their money locked up anyway, so.
Yep.
So this is like the way the orders work. So that you want
it's very similar, I think. Yeah. I've been trying to get my head around it for a while, but I'm pretty sure that two parties enter into a contract. But if you want to end the contract, you have to. In order for both parties to participate, you both have to put the same amount of money in as well. So it proves, it's like proof of work. You have to prove that, well, it's actually proof of stake.
Yeah.
You got to prove that you're invested in this interaction. And yeah, I'm still yet to go through the final.
The one thing I have a problem with is knowing how I would know whether the mediator arrived at a bad decision, either because it was done poorly or in bad faith. At the moment, I don't have access to that.
Yeah, I might. Have you seen the mitigation or any interface of the mitigation yet? Or I think that the question is, how do you know that the mediator is doing a good job?
I think that will be implemented in the final stage of the swarm. So we're in stage 3 right now, which is the boardwalk, and the next stage will be storefront. So when storefront comes out, we haven't set a date for that, but when it comes out, that'll be one of the features of storefront. We're currently in the testing phases where we've got hashtags. Hashtags, anyone can own a hashtag. So imagine that you owned the rideshare hashtag and you made it really popular and you put in 100,000 people in there because you had an awesome, and they were able to influence people to come and join that hashtag. The person that owns the hashtag gets a fee from anyone transacting inside or under that hashtag. Kind of like how banks charge transaction fees, but it's a really small fee. But when you've got 100,000 people all using that and saying, hey, I want to ride, hey, I want to ride, hey, I want to ride, you're getting fee. and you can create competing hashtags. So you'll be in competition with other people, right? And then how they do business and the best practices, and people will come along to you and say, hey, why don't you do things? Oh, you charge too much, la, 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 la. And so it creates this whole decentralized platform where people are really improving the way that they do business because they're in competition with one another. And then you'll see like the standards and the way that people operate and the things that they offer really improve. You won't have problems. You won't have problems with people complaining about certain things because people will just move over to another hashtag that does it better and charges a smaller fee, for example, or but does a better job of it.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. But yeah, the way I understand it, you can go. Anyone can go and create a hashtag about something, and it might be we're the blue taxi ride service, and these guys will go and create the red taxi ride service. And there's a reputation on the actual hives. Those hashtags are called hives or swarms of bees, and they can compete against each other. And this group of 100 taxis might do the business this way, and they produce this type of service. And it might leave a bad taste for some people in some people's mouths, whereas this service does the service this way, and they have these standards, and this is how they treat their customers. So different hives are going to compete against each other.
And I'm not just limited to like rideshare. It could be that you want to sell coffee beans. So it could be that you want to meet up with someone in your local area and you are the person. And it could be anything that you can foresee that is not going to get you into trouble with the local law enforcement or the local authorities somehow. So it's not purely just limited to rideshare.
So that's the question that just came from the crowd was what's stopping monopolies forming or hives getting too big?
It resorts back again to anybody being able to create their own hashtag and there being really reasonable fees to it. Nothing's stopping people trying to create monopolies, but whether they succeed or not is a different story. Like they can try to create a monopoly just because they are able to do mass marketing, right? And nothing stops someone else doing the same thing. Like if they've built up communities, which is very easy to do with the groups that we've set up all over the globe. We set up pages on Telegram, on Snapchat. We've got Instagram. We've got pages on Facebook all over the globe. We're in communities. We have Hangout calls, and we have this 3 pirate rule, which says that if any 3 people think that something is a good idea, then they should just go for it. I suggest that anybody that's interested in joining the project have a read of SWARMWise and how that operates, and then come with their own ideas, because we're empowering people to be entrepreneurs and to build this the way that we think that on the globe wants it to evolve. It's not just limited to thinking like what everyone wants this to become, because it started out with doing things different was working. We are operating a decentralized fashion where we don't like people locking up. We believe in like self-ownership and self-governance. So you are responsible for your own life, for the actions that you take. So with those principles in mind, it's also the do no harm principle. So if you cause harm, then you have to take accountability for the harm you've caused and try and rectify it somehow if you can. And we think of measures that we can put in place so that if someone is responsible for causing harm, then there's a procedure which we can go into, and we are still creating those procedures as we go along. But that's why we invite everyone that comes from all walks of life to come and help out with that, place in a decentralized fashion, so that it's not just limited to one party that is corrupt. And if you've ever seen that movie Law Abiding Citizen, he abides by every single law under the book, and he still manages to get screwed by the courts and being like a super criminal as a result of it. He's like, how could I follow everything and still get screwed?
We have a question. Yeah.
Could you have hives within hives? So supposing I set up a hashtag for an apartment building, and then within that, set up a series of other hashtags, or people can set up hashtags within that to do things within that particular.
Technically, yes. Technically, yes. So nothing really, and I don't know whether I should say this or not, but nothing technically stops anyone taking the existing ideas, because everything is open source. Nothing stops anyone taking what is currently made, right? City app, Swarm.City website, and then creating their own brand and version of it, and then placing their own modifications to our current project. We could see duplicates. We could see like Swarm.City token 1, Swarm.City token 2, and variations of that token. There could be Swarm.City tokens on different cryptocurrency platforms, not just Ethereum. So the Swarm could evolve where they're just like, look, Ethereum isn't the right platform for this project. We need more privacy-focused cryptocurrency. Okay? So we want to rebuild the project under a different cryptocurrency platform, like Waves, or like Verge, or like EOS in the future. It's not limited. If you can find programmers to program it, then by all means, there could be another complete project with your own team, with the principles of SWARMWise, right? And then you could create your own hives under our hives, and you could have it like layered even. You could have it like an inception sort of thing, like within a hive, and you have like one to the top, like the main hive, and then you have like mini hives, and they've all got their own marketing communication teams. Structure it however you want. We've kind of got the principles in place. It's kind of like a new way of going about things. And so we've got the whole ecosystem. We've got a manual that we're following, and we've got the 3 pirate rule. And there's plenty of other principles in that book that I suggest people reading. It's too in-depth for me to go into it right now, but it's pretty awesome. And I personally had a call with.
Can I just ask you a question? I'm actually a developer of another cryptocurrency called Pascal Coin. And
Pascal.
We have, yeah. I'm one of the core devs there. And we have like achieved 100 transactions per second on the mainnet, which I think is a more viable platform for large-scale smart contracts and dApps. I was just wondering, what's the interface? Because you mentioned before that Swarm.City can run on other cryptocurrencies. What's the sort of interface that needs to be built in order to integrate something like Swarm.City with a different non-UTXO based cryptocurrency like Pascal Coin?
So we have what's called GitHub. GitHub is the platform that everyone goes to check out the code. It's open source. Anybody can take it and then they can make it their own. If you can make modifications and port it to a different platform, then by all means. It's just a matter of whether people like your idea and then they're willing to commit to it. So if you can convince people, like enough people, that Pascal Coin is the way to go and there's reasons for you to go over to that, you could make videos and then explain to people on that are part of the community why it's a good option, and try and persuade them to join your platform. And then you could call it the Swarm.City Pascal project or something. There'll be nothing stopping that.
What's the like? How do you integrate this sort of abstraction layers between the two coins? So, what is like how's your code structure? What are the data structures? Or could you explain a little bit about that? Like, getting into a bit of a technical explanation on how the system actually is structured and some of the fundamental concepts.
Fundamental concepts with regards to the programming. I'm not a programmer, so that's a technical question you need to speak to the programmers about.
Probably
currently have it, so, and we have all this on our Medium articles. It's all written in there. But from what I understand, there's 3 stages that we have gone through. And stage 1 was we created a platform which was called. I should know this. I don't know. I'm having a mental blank. Stage 1 was pretty much like a register, or a way of transferring token values from one person to the other. Stage 2 is the boardwalk, and the boardwalk is where they're able to post jobs on an app.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You mentioned that before, that you integrated with other cryptocurrencies, but I just looked at it there and it looks like an Ethereum only sort of thing.
Standard Ethereum right now.
It's an ERC20 contract.
Yeah,
It's difficult to work out with. Most blockchains don't run.
I said it could be. It hasn't been integrated with other cryptocurrencies. It could technically be integrated with others.
Yeah.
I think it'd be up to you to create an integrate.
Yeah, but it seems like a whole new project. You can't just you don't do the whole thing.
Yes, but then you still have to go through the stages required, which is having a community that's willing to implement procedures and then make it an official project. You can't just take the Swarm.City project, right, and then all of a sudden it's an official project. Like if you were to create a Waves token, for example, there are plenty of people creating Waves tokens, but that doesn't mean that anybody's going to use them. So you still have to have a community behind it, and there's still forms that you have to fill out. So we as a community got together, right, like activists, and then we were hitting up all these websites, including exchanges, including the Shapeshift people. We all got together and we started messaging them and saying, we want to feature our token on your platform. We want it on Bittrex, we want it on Cryptopia, we want it on Shapeshift. And then eventually we kept bombarding them and asking for what we wanted and connecting with as many people as we could until they recognized us as an official project and they said yes.
That's what it takes to make an official project.
Yes. Well, it's more than that. We had legal contracts and everything else like that.
We've got another question here. How do you own a hashtag? I think it's possible.
Hashtags will be released soon. That's the second part of Boardwalk, and after that it will be storefronts. It's pretty much first come, first serve, and you put down a fee to own the hashtag. Once you own the hashtag, then you can set up the parameters of the hashtag. I don't know too much else about it, other than it is coming relatively soon, and it's coming before stage 3, which is the storefronts.
I don't think there'd be any legal binding. I think nothing.
And again, hashtags.
They're just sort of when you register a hashtag. It's not
Hashtag is like a business owner. There are many business owners in the current. Everybody play by the rules? Certainly not. Some do, some choose to, some choose not to. There's nothing that we can do. We are a decentralized commerce platform. So Swarm.City itself is not responsible for how people choose to operate their businesses.
Hey, Christopher, have you heard of the Particle platform? And if you have you got any thoughts about that? Particle.
I have not heard about the Particle platform. Could you tell me a bit about it?
It's
and then I can tell you.
Particle without the E, so it's PARTICL.io, and it's basically a blockchain, proof of stake blockchain like Bitcoin. It's literally a fork of Bitcoin, but it has an eBay built into it, like a market, like Syscoin. But
okay.
So, but the thing is that they run everything on their own chain, their own data storage network, which means that it has more scale. Like, it can't compete with eBay or Alibaba, but it can get like 10% of Alibaba, which is like billions and billions, right, of commerce. So, I mean, that's where we're going with like, being able to actually reach those numbers of users. And if you look at Ethereum, and how on earth can the world's slowest computer run the world's business logic?
Good question as well. So that's another technical question for the programmers. That's one of the concerns I've had myself. I will need to ask them personally how we can scale those transactions and whether it will be feasible in the long run. Because if we do reach that number of users, then we could run into a problem which may require us to switch blockchains, for example. But there are always solutions for everything that we encounter. I know that we are already building our own gas station, so that's the current happenings of Swarm.City. You
can't just switch your technology overnight. Like, if all your technology and hundreds of millions of dollars are invested in one platform, you just can't go, okay, let's switch another blockchain overnight, right? It's like, it takes a whole reinvestment, maybe half of what the original was, but it would still require, and that's the question, can you even like...
Yeah, I just want to answer that question. So, I mean, I work at Consensus, and Consensus have had a big say in the development of Quorum. And do you guys know what Quorum is? And I'm not saying Quorum's the holy grail, so I'm just pointing that out. But I spun up a Quorum, 7 nodes on Quorum, and we were doing 100,000 transactions a second with 7 nodes. So that's what Quorum can do. And I know that if you put more computers onto that blockchain, it's going to slow down. But
100,000.
100,000, yeah, 7 nodes.
So how does it distribute the processing storage?
I have no idea. It's just that's just the general rule that Quorum can do with 7 nodes, 100,000 transactions a second right now. And yeah, that's. But I also know that
Is that Ethereum?
The Quorum is a copy of Ethereum, and Quorum's designed so that as services get chopped up on Ethereum, they can have a choice to just move literally an overnight switch to Quorum, and all they have to do is also manage the miners as well. So it would be that maybe Swarm.City gets to a point. This might play out that Swarm.City gets really big, and it can't handle the transactions, and everyone's having a big whinge, and so it's like, okay, well, let's use Quorum. But then, okay, well, who's going to be the miners? Okay, then we don't need to choose who's going to be the miners. And it might be that the community comes to consensus that, everyone who's got the top 20 reputations or the top, 1,000 reputations on Swarm. Yeah, so it moves into centralized, but then we can have next conversations. At least we can scale. I'm hardcore decentralized person, but yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, it's got to run on a home PC, like a big
yeah.
So
eventually.
You're saying that it could become potentially centralized in a way, but it is only to the point that you can hear a big echo. I think the speakers might be near the microphone or something, or it's turned up too loud. Yeah, it's only centralized to the point where people aren't able to take the open source technology and then use it for themselves, or they have a problem financing the project, in which case there's plenty of earning opportunities if we got to that phase, right, to be able to afford to invest in these technologies. So, for example, there are plenty of mining platforms right now that you can go on, and then you can invest in miners that will generate you, for example, Genesis Mining. And nobody's asking them to sort of manage these machines or to expand their operations or their warehouses or anything like that, but they're doing it because they want their customers and because they're making a profit out of it. So the same thing could happen in the future. We could see people setting up these technologies which enable the expansion, right? And then they could say, if you want us to continue doing what we're doing and you want to own part of the plus expand our network, right? We'll help you invest in this, right? We'll set up the technology. You just pay us this fee, and then we'll manage it for you. People that also do the same thing, and maybe they do it a little bit better, right? That's the whole concept of decentralized networks and decentralized commerce, right? That does it a little bit better, charges a little bit less of a fee, right? And then people have the choice between going with the older one or the newer one that does it a little bit better. So you got that competition, and maybe party 3 comes out and they're like, hey, we figured out a way to solve this particular problem with it, and we do the stuff that both of those two have. We've got cost, and the other one's a little bit more costly, but it does it a little bit better. And then the third one comes along and says, hey, I can do it low cost and I can do it better than both of them. And then people go for option 3. So like that. So I think like Tom can now explain what I mean.
That sounds like what's happened to Bitcoin or most open source projects. So yeah. We got any other questions? We had some questions over here. Graham?
I'm just interested on Chris's vision for Swarm.City. Where does he want to take this?
What's your vision for it? Without sounding too
my
crazy.
vision was my vision from the start was we were originally trying to build a competitor to Uber, and now it's just my imagination takes me in so many different directions. It's hard to pretty much to stick to one at a time, but I'll stick with what I envisioned for when it was just Arcade City. and I don't like to mention this name too much because it's associated with Christopher David, and we kind of don't work with him anymore. But when it was a ride sharing platform, I was envisioning people using the service to do all sorts of fun things. Like there could be a ride where you have particular rides, or you could have one where you had the same music taste, or you had a ride where the person would roll up and then they would have like food with them, like chocolates or something, depending on your preferences. So you could really cater it, or it could be, I like to take businessmen only, or I only take females because it's a females only ride, and females want to feel protected with other female like drivers, for example. So you could set it up that way. See if you can tailor the ride to meet your preferences. City.
Christopher, can I ask a question about
Sure.
from an investor's point of view, just quickly? Like
Sure.
a lot of people bought into Arcade City. That was what was it? I think this was originally called, believing that it would be like an Uber on Ethereum, and those people now have they've kept that token, that investment, and it's now. Now this project has kind of morphed into something else. I know there's a bit of controversy during that transition involving Vitalik's father and some money moving around. So there's a bit of like skepticism, well, not skepticism, but there's a bit of bad blood, I'd say, between investors and Swarm. What's your message to them?
My message is, it's unfortunate that the investors kind of got screwed with what happened with Arcade City. That was the beef with Christopher David. He's taken the bad come up of that. We are essentially a new project altogether. We've completely disassociated ourselves from Arcade City. Legally, that brand is owned still by him. He's still got the whole Arcade City project under his name. He's the CEO of it. Want to chase funds off him? Welcome to do so. We have nothing to do with it. Swarm.City is a separate project, completely separate. Same team, but it's like the employees absconded like a bunch of bees, as I said, sense smoke in the hive, and they're like, we're recreating it again from scratch. So that's what we did. We found programmers to work with us. We used whatever funds we had at our disposal, and we tried to be as fair as we could, despite the fact that we didn't have to the investors that kind of got screwed, and to the people that worked so hard in building this concept.
Thank you, Chris.
Some people got some allocations and some people didn't. So, yes.
Thanks.
All right, we've got a question out the back here.
Yeah. So, in relation to just let's use the example of like a ride-sharing service like Uber. I noticed when I was giving the preview of the platform that a price was set for the task. How do you plan on scaling that ride-sharing service? For instance, if I want to go to my house and then I want to go past McDonald's on the way, how am I meant to know what that is worth? And then say the price of your token will vary, as most tokens do, then do I need to scale the price of what I think that trip's worth to the AUD equivalent? Or do I just go, I paid 20 tokens last time, it's going to be 20 tokens this time?
Good question. So that goes into a philosophical question as to what gives anything value. So what right now gives any of the fiat currency notes in your pockets value? Why is that worth anything? It's an idea in people's minds, is it not? So you could go down to the McDonald's, right? And people that understood how economics works, they could say, hey, $5. Haven't you seen the current rate of inflation? Do you know how long I'd have to work in order to purchase a house at this point when you give me $5 a burger? Like, how many hours would I need to work at $20 an hour for me to purchase a house? But if they inflated the price of a burger at the same rate, okay, as what the McDonald's worker's salary should be, then the price of a burger would effectively be in the hundreds of dollars right now. So, to answer your original question as to what should the price of a ride be, I think to start out with, it'll be something that people could reasonably afford until until we become like, there's like a paradigm shift where everybody's on the blockchain technology and free market is deciding how things operate. And so you've got competition and they're charging this price and you're looking at what your neighbors are doing and how much they're charging. And then you're comparing it to this. It's kind of like the first movers get the most profit and then other people come and set up alongside, right? And then they charge a little bit less and then they charge a little bit less. And then you have to kind of cater your services to say, will this meet my costings? So what it costs me to operate. And then B, who are my competitors and how much are they charging for a similar service? C, is it still lucrative for me to remain in this industry? So if a market gets flooded, for example, the rideshare market, and there's no longer much profit in it, why would you stick in that? Why would you stick in that? Why wouldn't you go off and start up a new industry or look at someone else that's a first mover and say, I'm going to join his industry? So it could be that people are getting into electric cars and that's a booming business. Why wouldn't you go and join the electric car business when money there than if you were in the ride sharing industry? So we're like the first movers by putting ride sharing and all these other things that we can think of, like Airbnb and whatever else that people can think of, onto the blockchain. Now other people are wanting to do the same. That's what everyone's doing right now. They're trying to get like real estate on the blockchain. They're trying to get medical services on the blockchain. They're trying to get everything you can think of on the blockchain. And so everyone's the first mover when it comes to this new technology. But come, I don't know, 5 years time, there'll be so many competing services that it's like, who am I going to choose? I don't know. You'll have five people to choose for medical, and you'll have like 10, 15 people to choose for appointing legal staff. And then if you want to, when you get a ride, the different ride share companies that you can choose. And then the prices will just sort of self-balance like water. Like you'll have like a tidal wave at the start. It'll be just coming at you. Oh my God, the prices are so high, but the service is so awesome. And then after that, things will stabilize and the river will come down because there'll be so many other people coming in and then pretty much stabilize everything. Free market competition.
Next question. You've had a lot of questions.
Sorry, I saw the hashtag. Is there going to be a way of adding branding?
That's the storefront. Yeah, he's just. Did you hear that?
No. Could you repeat the question, please?
He was asking, with the hashtags, is there any way that they can add branding and other things like that to have a bit of flair? I guess is that templates? Can they add templates to the hashtag, or what's the deal?
I believe so. If that's not currently a feature, it's always flexible. There's always a conversation that could be had with the programmers to add those features in later, at a later date. That's kind of the beauty of our project. We are fluid like water. Now there may not be a feature, but if you have a conversation on the Slack channel, I'm sure that your brilliant idea could come into fruition.
Yep. I'll just say something as well quickly. Yes, I mean, like the storefront is going to have a lot of those features. That's why they're calling it this. You know, so hashtags, and then you're going to put a storefront on the front of the hashtag, and that's where you'll be able to do a lot of that sort of customization. But there's nothing stopping people, like HTML page, there's nothing stopping people looking at that page and looking at and saying, look, I want something there, you know, right there. And then going and looking at the code, which is right here as well, which I just loaded up before, and saying, oh yeah, let's just create this. The whole thing's created out of Polymer widgets, which sort of compartmentalizes the website. So any little bit can just be switched and changed in the website itself. So it's designed in a pretty cool way like that as well. Just sort of pointing out
that's a bit technical.
Yeah, there's nothing stopping someone just creating a little component that they want on the website and putting it out to the community and saying, is this good? And if people like it, they'll start using it.
You're only limited by your understanding of how things work. That's what I'll say. So
But
if you can talk to people and figure out how it works and appoint people to do it, then
just say something. We are limited by
you're good.
throughput on the network, and that's like everything I heard. Everything I heard lives in a world where the transaction throughput is just not. It's physically unachievable.
Yeah.
So how do you reconcile that?
It's the same when I bought my 486 computer. Like, you know, I just maxed it out anyway, and then worked out the problems later on.
That's right.
And that's my approach to it all. We're just very early days.
As I said, if there's smoke in the hive and there's no room for expansion or growth,
Well,
then
it
the
is-
swarm will go where the swarm makes it.
There were a lot of Arcade City investors, and now, like, instead of actually getting an Uber, they've got kind of screwed. And now there's a new promise to deliver it, like, not just Uber, but like 2,000 times Uber. And, you know, what's going to be the result of those investors? If they keep buying into this token, are they going, yeah, that's one of the things that concerns me. I'm sorry to talk about it, but it is something that a lot of people are getting, you know, affected with.
As with all investments, it comes with levels of risk. We had no way of knowing that he was going to do that, and we have to deal with the hand that we were dealt. I mean, until this stage, and we still managed to find awesome people to support the project, including Vinar Mani, who's a liberty activist, and he's done some great work. And we've had plenty of people going to conferences, and we've built strong communities all over the globe, and finding new people and new talented people to help support the project every day. So it's really like we're trying to do risk mitigation here. We're trying to make sure this is a thing about SWARMWise, yeah. And then they make mistakes, but we don't get mad about the fact that we make mistakes. We learn from them. So you learn from history and you try and prevent it from happening again. There was a point, right, where I could have had enough tokens to have $250,000 in my pocket, right? And then we got hacked, and then overnight $200,000 was gone about it. So you don't cry over spilt milk, sort of thing. Like it's in my head. I'm like, if I was in the jungle, these are the bare cities that I'd need to continue on doing business, and I live with that mentality. I'm like, everything above this is a luxury. Like I don't. The universe doesn't owe me shit, in a sense. Okay, so I live by that mentality as an entrepreneur, and I continue to build value wherever I can.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, and I apologize for the difficult question, but the answer is much appreciated.
Who's got the next question? I just want to. You got at the back.
So I'm interested in like the distributed organisation. So Swarm.City as an organisation is completely distributed. It's an open source.
Can you hear him clearly?
Yeah, he said Swarm.City as an organisation is an open source project or something.
Yeah, is that correct?
Is that correct?
Yeah, I think you should just come up and ask a question. Yeah.
Swarm.City is a distributed organization. So how does work happen, and how do people get paid? Do people do this in their spare time, or are people full-time?
Both. Okay, so before the Parity Wallet hack, people were being paid from the investors' funds, and then as soon as the Parity Wallet hack happened, which nobody knew that was going to come here, I certainly didn't. We became more decentralized. So pretty much people are paying each other with Swarm.City tokens that they purchase off of exchanges or that they already have in their pocket for completing other services on the platform. So someone might be like, tell me a joke. This is just in the testing phases. Tell me a joke for one Swarm.City token, which is worth about $2 Australian. And someone says, oh, like, why did the chicken cross the road? Blah, 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 to get to the other side. Or something like that. And whoever tells the funniest joke gets the one Swarm.City token. Now, it might be other things. We've seen people offering coffee beans. They say, hey, I'll sell this bag of coffee beans for 20 Swarm.City tokens, which is, I don't know, about $40 right now. And then so they send the Swarm.City tokens over, then they get into a private chat, which is a Whisper encrypted chat. You can interfere with that chat once they're in a transaction. And then they tell each other, this is my address. Hey, send it to me. Thank you so much. And then as soon as the other person receives their item, which is the coffee beans, the transaction is completed and then the funds are dispersed. So that's how it currently works.
And that's how the developers are kind of paid for their work and that sort of stuff?
The developers are currently they have got funds, I believe, from working while they had investors' funds, but right now they're working because of their passion in the project and because they're already quite wealthy themselves, and just because they want to see where this is going.
So it's kind of like part movement.
They are kind of, yeah, it's part movement, part organization. So they all, like me personally, I want to see like the world more prosperous. That's why I do it. I'm not doing it so much for what I'm going to get out of it, because I know that at the end of the day, if things don't change the way of doing things, then we're still going to be working our asses off, everyone in the world, non-stop forever, like these crappy slave jobs. But if we get into blockchain technology, Bitcoin, for example, started off with $1. Then people built all these services and goods and transactions on that platform, and then that became $4,000. So the same thing happens with Swarm.City. If communities get behind it and there's real tangible, real world value being built into the platform, currently sitting at $2, right? They go skyrocketing up to like $400, $500, especially if something similar to Uber was on the platform, or Airbnb. Like, can you imagine having a share in a company like Uber or Airbnb in the early days, and then seeing what it is 5 years later? There's millions of people in the world that use that service, so it's going to go through the roof. That's what we originally got into the project for.
Uber's very profitable. Not for drivers, but for the company, it's very profitable.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it.
So if you guys are trying to build a marketplace requires buyers and it requires sellers. It requires service providers and it requires people to need a service, right? Have you guys done any models on what sort of critical mass you guys need in specific areas? So I know, for example, in market models, if you've got, let's say, we're selling cars on the sell side, and then you've got a bunch of people who want to buy fucking potatoes, you can have 1 million sellers and 1 million buyers, but 0 transactions, therefore 0 value of the platform. So how the hell are you guys going to hit a critical mass of users that makes transactions viable when you've got so many different potential services, so many different potential products? Like, if I'm on there looking for a driver and I'm in Perth and you guys have 10,000 drivers and they're all in fucking Paris.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that. The company doesn't work like that, and you need to read the book, the SWARMWise book.
Yeah, correct.
It's not a really good question because the company doesn't work like that.
How's the critical mass going to get hit?
It doesn't matter. It's just about putting the tools out there, and if humans want to trade with one another.
Be right back. Be right back.
Yeah, go. I was just saying it's that Swarm they're not thinking about, oh, we need to get the buyers, and the sellers on here. It's just about building the tools, and then if there's a community needy enough that needs a tool that can facilitate this sort of trading of ride sharing or whatever it might be, here they've got a solution finally, because there's nothing out there right now, like really for people to just trade in a sort of like a decent.
Build the tools and the people will come.
Yeah, and it does work like that. Yeah. It does actually work like that. Yeah.
Have you got any projections? Any some numbers you can?
Someone just wrote, critical mass happens organically. Alabama provided no value when it started, and now it is massive.
Christopher, have you got any projections for like commerce throughput per year? Like any graphs or anything out there that can
These sound like questions. These sound like questions for my business hive, not for me. I don't get into the nitty-gritties.
But is there?
I'm more of an ideas visionary man.
Do you think we should,
I never liked bureaucracy.
Do you think we should organize a session with one of the programmers from Swarm or something like that?
Yeah. For the technical questions, speak to the programming hive or the dev team. They'd love to answer all your technical nitty-gritty questions. And for all your business questions like projections and graphs and charts, speak to either Matthew Carano from the communications hive or speak to the business hive Burned Lap.
All right.
I'd love to answer all those questions. I deal with communities and building communities and relationships and social media. So I hope that answers your question.
I should have told them that. I didn't realize. Who has the next question? Can it be shut down? Government regulations, things like that?
No, can't be shut down at this point unless they shut off the internet. We don't exist anywhere. Like, people can come and say, oh, it's banned in Australia, but wasting your job, and nobody can really be identified if you don't want to be. So it could be so that they could scare people out of using it, right? But technically they can't stop it. Just like the government can't be everywhere at once. They can't say, oh, you've found someone in front of Coles that wants to go to the airport right now and they're willing to pay you cash. We found out about that. How are they going to know? They can't find out. Okay, so it's the same thing. Like, you create an encrypted channel, right? And then you have reputation points associated with it. So those reputation points are a good indicator for the consumer as to whether transactions have been successful or whether they have been non-successful. So if the reputation is high, then we know that the transactions have gone through smoothly. And if the reputation is low, then there's obviously a reason for why that's low, and it's like you're less inclined to want to trust that person because there hasn't been a lot of transactions with that person's name. And these reputations can be built up through groups of people, or by knowing people in your community, and you can social network and find out who's a good person, and that's where the Facebook groups and stuff come in. So you build trust by that and say, hey, there's this person on Swarm.City. They've got a trusted hive. They only let good people in. They do their vetting. They do their filtration process. Go into that hive, you'll be taken care of. So there can still be leadership, right? Nobody's saying that you can't have leadership. And then those problems, they kind of fade away. And then there's other more daring people that are really strong. They're used to security. They've maybe worked in armed forces and stuff, right? They're willing to take a bit of risk because they know that they can take care of themselves. In America, you can have a gun on you at all times. So it's like, you mess with me, what are you going to do? Like, and then you test people out and you see who's good, just like you would. Like, you send police officers out right now to sort of protect your body and stuff like that. Same thing goes. Like, you find someone that's really good, just like you would hire a security person. They test out the community members. They see who's good, or they hold a meetup and they find out and they get to know people and stuff. And they say, okay, this person's good, that person's not. Stay away from them. They don't seem to know what they're talking about. They don't provide a good service. They seem a little bit crazy in the head. Stay away from them. And then you build up your own hashtag. You put in good members, good service providers, and then bam, you've got a good community and people get taken care of. And then you have very strict rules on your particular group that if you break rules and you don't try and amend them, you'll get 3 warnings. On the 3rd warning, you're kicked out of our group because we don't have that in our particular group. Go join another group because we want to maintain and keep getting fees. So there's an incentive for the hashtag owner to keep good people in their group. Because if they don't, then people stop using it and they go to another group. Hope that makes sense.
Anyone else have any more questions, or I think we'll end it there otherwise? That's good. Yeah, I'll send out to the whole meetup. I'll send out a link to the Git page, Swarm, the book. So that, by the way, the book is written by, his name's Rick someone.
Rick Forkfinger.
Rick Forkfinger. There you go. And so the summary of the book really is, I'm about halfway through reading the book, but it's basically, you know, the Pirate Bay Party, how did they win 6 seats in the European election, you know, when these other officials had budgets of like, you know, $50 million and Rick had a budget of $40,000. Like, how did he get 6 seats out of the whole 200 and whatever seats it is? And it's like there must be some type of efficiency that happens in these and it was a decentralized organization. There's no hierarchical, you know, nature to the Pirate Bay Party at the time. So how did it happen? And then Rick writes a book and he explains all these concepts, all these decentralized organizing, and they use examples like the Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, meetings and things like this to show that there are actually really good decentralized organizations out there, and you know, it's just about opening up our eyes to them. And so Yeah, that's what Swarm is designed around. This whole, you know, how can this decentralized organizations properly kick off? And so that is a really good introduction to this different way of doing things. I guess that's the best way of putting it. Because I honestly think it's a different way of doing things. But you know, what got me is that Vitalik's father, he's very interested in you know, world-changing ideas, and he obviously taught his son Vitalik programming, and then, you know, they went and created, obviously Ethereum got created from all that. But, you know, Vitalik's father is invested in like 3 or 4 projects, and Swarm's one of them. So there's, you know, there's something in it, but we've just got to wait and see, and or start, you know, doing stuff with it now, where it's at. Go for it. Oh, do I have to pin you to a date? I don't think we can pin you to a date, Christopher.
You repeat the question, please.
Oh, they're just asking if they could pin the storm front to a, not a date but a quarter.
Quarter. Storefront. You have to ask the programmers. I'm not. There's no bosses here. We want to see progress, but we also don't want to. We don't want to make technology that breaks. So, I mean, they can give you updates and they can tell you what they're working on and what features and stuff, but we want to build it right. I'd like to say that it's going to happen sometime this year, but it probably won't be any time before December. That's all I can tell you. We're waiting to see, first and foremost, the next stage of Boardwalk, which is going to be awesome, where they bring out the ability to not have to record being in your wallet, and then tweaks and the ability to also use hash, be able to create your own hash in the second additional Boardwalk 2.0. So hope to see that one soon. We anticipate storefront.
Thanks very much, Chris, for your time and doing this. I know that, you know. And the other thing, I mean, I got very frustrated with Swarm maybe 4 or 5 months ago, but I mean, and I wanted to know when the next update was out and things like this. And then I ended up finding the actual Trello board where, you know, they're actually managing the jobs, and I could see exactly what programmers were doing what. And yeah, so you can just look up exactly what job they're at, right? It's an open source project, so you can look it up.
There you go. Things happening all the time. There's a Trello board. You just need to do your exploring, and then if you show interest in it, you can join the Slack and you can get involved, and you can make things happen. You can make things change. You can believe in community and building things and making things better. You can make an impact by finding people that are willing to listen to you inside the Slack. If you're a professional, if you treat people right, and you can persuade people by coming up with a good idea, then change. Like, it's hard for me to say impact on this project, because in a way, in another way, like, it wasn't just me. I was listening to everyone from the community and what they all wanted, and then I was taking those ideas and giving them to the people that, and being that social lubricant in a way. So, and it wasn't just me. It was the efforts of Jennifer Williams, Christopher Winston, Harris, and all the other 1811 members that originally founded the Arcade City project. They all contributed. So there's thousands and thousands of people that helped build it into what it is today. And I can't just take credit for all of that. Like, it was everyone. It was everyone. Those are the people that I chose to work with in my particular hive. There's so many people that have contributed that are outside of my hive that I couldn't tell you even who is working on the project at this point and who's not. Like, it's beyond me. Maybe about 5 months ago I could have told you. Since then I've lost track of who's working on it, not, because they're all doing different things. And I mean, like, you could send yourself mad going in the Slack and just following all the things that people are saying. But there's even a section for people that want to contribute new ideas. Why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? And like, the programmers are overwhelmed. So I think there's going to be a separate programming team because there's going to be two different communities. They're going to split, and they're going to be like, this community wants to do it this way, and this that way. And they're going to take the code, and then they're going to fork it, and they're going to say Swarm City A, Swarm City B. Probably will happen in the future. Just my guess. Once this thing gets rolling and people can say, oh yeah, it's viable, but why are we doing it this way? And why not do it that way? And then they're going to argue about it back and forth. They're going to be like, okay, let's just split it. Like, you do it that way, we'll do it this way. Like, kind of like in The Simpsons, you've got Shelbyville and then Springfield. One has the lemon tree, one has the turnip tree.
But that's good, right? Because everyone gets what they want.
That's it. That's the beauty of competition.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming. It's brilliant to see so many people in attendance and so many questions. Thank you so much. Awesome.
I'll stop it there.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. Much appreciated. You have a good night.
Take care.
Thank you all.